She was supposed to be dead for 3 years. Instead, she walked back onto a military range, with no rank, no name, and a rifle case in her hand. What started as a public humiliation turned into a full-scale shock when one pulled-up sleeve exposed the tattoo of Death Angel, and with it, a conspiracy buried deep inside the military.
Well now, sweetheart, what's your rank? Or are you just here to buff our boots? The Admiral's voice, thick with condescension, cut through the desert air as he and his 6 cronies swaggered past the firing line. They thought they were hilarious, but they were about to get a lesson they'd never forget. If you've ever been underestimated, you are going to love this story, so you better stick around to see this epic takedown. We're out at Fort Davidson, in the middle of a scorching desert where about 15 soldiers were trying to qualify. The woman they were mocking didn't even look up. She was 29, built like a soldier, but her uniform was completely sterile, no name, no rank. She just sat in the shade, her hands moving with a fluid, practiced grace over the guts of a dismantled M1-10 sniper rifle. She was meticulously cleaning every single component, each motion so economical and precise you could tell it was burned into her muscles from thousands of hours of practice, not learned from some dusty field manual. Admiral Victor Kane, all 58 years of him, strutted closer. His chest was a Christmas tree of medals, and his face was set in a permanent scowl that just screamed, "I'm in charge." His shadow fell over her, but her rhythm didn't change one bit. "I asked you a question, miss," he snarled. His second in command, a smug 32-year-old lieutenant named Brooks, strolled up beside him, folding his arms like he owned the sand they were standing on. "Maybe she doesn't get it, sir," Brooks sneered. "Probably just one of the cleaning staff. You know, they let just about anyone wander onto the base these days." The other officers had a good laugh at that. A fresh-faced junior lieutenant, so new his uniform still had creases, nudged his buddy. "I'll bet you $10 she can't even load it," his friend countered. 20 says she's never handled anything with more kick than a 9mm. But way across the range, the old range master, a 62-year-old veteran named Ellis, saw the whole exchange. He'd been running this range for 15 years. He could smell a fake from a mile off. He narrowed his eyes, watching the scene unfold. There was something in the way the woman handled those rifle parts, the precise angle of her wrists, the slow, controlled rhythm of her breathing. It was different. Inhale for 4 counts, hold for 4, exhale for 4. His jaw tightened. He'd seen that breathing technique before, but only in places that were extremely, extremely dangerous. The Admiral leaned down, his voice a low threat. "Look at me when I'm addressing you, whether you're a private or the janitor or whatever the hell you are." For a split second, the woman's hands paused. Then, without a hint of agitation, she calmly set down the part she was cleaning. Not a single muscle in her face twitched. When she finally raised her head, her eyes were a cool, steely gray, and they met the Admiral's furious glare without an ounce of fear. "I have no rank to report, sir," she said, her voice even and quiet. "I'm simply here to qualify." Brooks let out a loud, theatrical snort. "Simply here to qualify. Did you get that, Admiral?" He looked back at his buddies. "Someone should probably give her a hand. That rifle has a kick like a mule." Another officer chimed in, grinning ear to ear. "Yeah, we should probably be her spotters. Make sure she doesn't get a boo-boo," he added with a chuckle. "Or, bring shame upon our entire branch of service." Ellis's hand drifted toward the radio on his belt, but he stopped. He couldn't take his eyes off the woman. 444. Box breathing. It was a technique hammered into the world's most elite Special Forces operators. He glanced at her hands again, the way she cradled the bolt, positioned just so for a lightning-fast reassembly in pitch darkness. A pit of unease formed in his stomach as the Admiral puffed out his chest. "Are you even authorized on this range?" he demanded. "Yes, sir." "And you intend to fire that weapon?" "Yes, sir." "From what distance?" For the very first time, the slightest trace of a smile touched her lips. 800 meters, sir." The group of officers erupted in laughter. Brooks actually slapped his thigh. 800! Oh, that's rich. He turned to the Admiral. "Sir, with all due respect, I need to see this. It'll be a fantastic training opportunity for the men on what not to do." The Admiral's expression was hard to read, but his eyes shined with a cold amusement. By all means, Lieutenant. Let's see what our friend here is made of. He gestured toward the firing line. Go ahead, dazzle us. The woman rose to her feet in a single, fluid motion, not even needing her hands to push off the ground. Her uniform was standard military issue, faded from use, with no insignia to hint at her identity. She scooped up the rifle, which she'd already reassembled, performed a quick functions check, and walked to lane 7. Ellis felt himself drifting toward her, a weird mix of apprehension and exhilaration churning in his gut. The woman got into position at the bench, her form absolutely textbook perfect. Left hand supporting the stock, right hand on the pistol grip, her body forming a perfect line with the rifle. Brooks leaned back with his arms crossed. Someone bring the lady a crate of ammo. She'll need all the practice she can get just to hit the target from that far out. Does she even know how to flip the safety off? Another officer snickered. She probably thinks the scope is for bird watching, a third one added, but the Admiral had stopped laughing. He was watching her now, his focus laser sharp. The woman tuned every single one of them out. She just kept her breathing steady. 4, 4, 4. Her trigger finger lay straight, resting on the frame right beside the trigger guard. Flawless discipline. She reached up and made a micro adjustment to the scope's elevation, then another tiny click for windage. The movements were so small, so sure. They were the kind that only come from a lifetime of repetition. Ellis was now only 10 feet away, close enough to see it all. His heart began to hammer against his ribs. He recognized that stance. He'd seen it only twice in his career, both times in situations so secret he was supposed to pretend they never happened. Anytime you're ready, the Admiral called out, his voice practically dripping with mock politeness. We're all waiting on you. The woman's breathing pattern shifted. She took 3 deep, cleansing breaths. On the tail end of the 4th exhale, at the exact moment her body was at its stillest point, her finger slid onto the trigger. The first shot cracked through the desert silence. The recoil barely nudged her. Without pulling her eye from the scope, she cycled the bolt, chambered a new round, settled, and breathed. The second shot rang out, then the third, the fourth, and the fifth. The whole sequence was over in just 18 seconds. Ellis didn't even need to look. He already knew what he would see. But he raised his spotting scope anyway, focusing it on the target 800 meters away. And there they were. Right in the dead center of the bullseye were 5 holes. The grouping was so tight, you could cover all of them with a nickel. He slowly lowered the scope, a slight tremor in his hands. Brooks and the other officers were dead silent, their mouths hanging open as they stared at the live feed on the tower's big screen. The digital scoreboard flashed the results. 5 shots, 5 perfect 10s, a perfect score, from 800 meters in 18 seconds. The Admiral's jaw was clenched so hard you could see the muscles bulging. He stomped over to the monitor. Check the rangefinder on that lane, he barked at a technician. It's calibrated every morning, sir, Ellis said, his voice a little hoarse. The distance is correct. Check it again. A young officer grabbed a handheld laser and sprinted out. Distance confirmed, sir. 800 meters on the dot. Brooks just gaped at the woman. She was sitting back from her rifle, her hands folded in her lap, looking as relaxed as if she'd just finished a crossword puzzle. He coughed, trying to force some authority into his voice. Just lucky. The wind must have died down. He narrowed his eyes at her rifle. That's a custom scope, right? She just stared back. Her expression, a complete blank. What kind of scope is that? Brooks pushed, his voice starting to squeak. Standard issue, Leopold, she replied, her tone flat as a desert highway. The same one you're using. No, that's impossible. Nobody can shoot like that with standard equipment. He spun around to face the Admiral. Sir, I request to inspect her weapon. It has to be modified. She has some kind of unfair advantage. The Admiral gave a curt nod. Go ahead. Brooks stomped toward lane 7, his hand reaching out to snatch her rifle. She didn't flinch, didn't even breathe, as he stormed over to her position. He didn't bother asking for permission. He just grabbed the rifle right off the bench. He turned it over and over, his eyes hunting for any sign of a cheat, a hidden switch on the scope, a custom trigger, something on the barrel. A disgusted scowl spread across his face when he came up empty. It was just a perfectly kept, regulation M110 rifle with a Leopold Mark V scope. No secret tech, no illegal modifications. He slammed it back onto the bench. Whatever, he sneered. So you can shoot. It's a fluke. A lucky gust of wind, a freak accident, it doesn't mean a thing. That's when Rangemaster Ellis couldn't keep quiet any longer. He took a step forward, his voice sharp enough to cut the tension. "Lieutenant," he announced, loud enough for the whole line to hear. That was not luck. "That's enough, Ellis. Stand down," Lieutenant Brooks snapped, his words like chips of ice. "I've got this." Ellis clamped his jaw shut, but his gaze remained fixed on the woman. She flickered her eyes toward him for a split second, and in that silent glance, a whole conversation passed a hint of acknowledgement and maybe even a warning to let it go. Her focus snapped back to her rifle. Brooks marched down to lane 7 until his boots were right beside her. He crossed his arms, studying her like some kind of lab experiment. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" he demanded. "Here and there, sir. That's not a real answer. It's the only one I'm cleared to give you, sir." One of Brooks's cronies snickered. "You're not cleared to do anything. You have zero authorization to be on this range. You're a nobody who just got lucky with a 1 in a billion shot." He got right in her face, his voice practically dripping with contempt. "My theory? Someone trained you. Had you practiced this one specific shot on this exact lane over and over just to put on a performance for the higher-ups?" The woman didn't react. She just started to field strip her rifle, her hands moving with the kind of fluid grace that only comes from 10,000 hours of repetition. Kane watched her, his eyes narrowing. If you're really as good as you're pretending to be, you won't have a problem doing it again. But this time, with some real pressure on the line. She paused, her hand frozen over the rifle's bolt. "What kind of pressure, sir?" "The official military marksman qualification. Tomorrow morning, 0800. A different range, targets at random distances, and a ticking clock. The full gauntlet. If you pass, you're certified. If you fail," he leaned in close, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper, "you are banned from this facility for life. And I'll personally make it my mission to tell everyone on this base that you're a complete phony." "Respectfully, sir, I wasn't trying to perform for anyone." "Then you'll have no issue proving it," Kane barked, puffing his chest out. 0800. You better be ready. And don't even think about bailing, because I'm not authorizing any more base resources for a fake. Brooks just grinned. "This is going to be epic. I'll even bring a camera to capture the spectacular failure for the history books." The two officers turned and walked away, their laughter echoing across the empty firing range. Standing about 20 feet off to the side, Rangemaster Ellis had witnessed the entire exchange. The woman calmly finished disassembling her weapon, placing each part into its designated slot in the foam-lined case, before shutting it with a solid click. She stood, picked up the case, and started to leave. As she walked past Ellis, she hesitated for less than a second. Her eyes met his, and he saw something there that sent a cold wave of dread through him. It wasn't anger or humiliation. It was a profound, ancient calm, the look of someone who has waited their entire life for a moment just like this one. "Rangemaster," she said, her voice a quiet murmur. And that was it. She kept walking toward the setting sun, her boots kicking up tiny puffs of dust with every step. He stood there until her form was just a dark shape against the orange sky. Then, with a hand that had started to shake, he raised his radio and switched it to a secure frequency. "Control, this is Rangemaster Ellis. I've got a situation to report, and this needs to stay off the official record." The radio crackled, and a steady voice replied, "Go ahead, Ellis." He took a shaky breath, looking around to make sure he was alone. That shooter, the woman who just landed 5 rounds in the bullseye from 800 meters in under 20 seconds. "I think," he had to stop and swallow, "I think you need to run her fingerprints. And you need to do it with extreme discretion. Because if I'm right about who that is, we are about to have a very serious problem on our hands." "Understood, Ellis. Give us the lane number and the time. We'll handle it from here." Ellis lowered his radio, his gaze fixed on the now empty lane 7 where the sandbags still held the faint outline of her rifle. 5 shiny brass casings lay scattered in the dirt, catching the last bit of daylight. 5 flawless shots, 18 seconds, from a distance of 800 meters. He'd been a range master for 15 years. He'd seen world-class champions, elite special operators, and legendary Marine snipers. Not a single one of them had ever managed a shot pattern that clean, from that far away, in that short a time. Not even close. He recalled the rhythm of her breathing, a calm 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out. He remembered her grip, her stance, and the unnervingly serene expression she held as a group of officers verbally tore her apart. She never rose to the bait, never got defensive, never even tried to explain herself. She just took it all in, like a person who had already survived much worse. So much worse. She had the presence of someone who knows that words are just noise when your real work is done from half a mile away. Ellis bent over and picked up one of the spent shell casings, standard military-issue brass. Nothing special about it at all, except for the impossible journey its bullet had just taken. On pure instinct, he slipped it into his pocket and began the slow walk back to the control tower. His mind was a whirlwind, connecting pieces of a puzzle he didn't want to solve, forming a picture he was terrified to see. Because if his gut was telling him the truth, Lieutenant Kane had just made the most colossal, and possibly the final, mistake of his life. And tomorrow morning, when she showed up for his little test, things were about to get incredibly real. If you think she's just a one-trick pony, you have no clue what's about to be unleashed. Go ahead and smash that like button if you're ready to witness some stone-cold justice. And you're definitely going to want to subscribe, because you don't want to miss the exact moment these arrogant officers get everything they have coming to them. As the sun disappeared completely, a quiet fell over the range. The last of the soldiers trudged back to their barracks, their chatter fading into the evening air. Lane 7 was now dark, quiet, and waiting. Tomorrow was shaping up to be a day no one on this base would ever forget. Meanwhile, in an office building at 5:15 p.m., Lieutenant Brooks was staring at his laptop, his cold coffee sitting untouched. For the last 10 minutes, he'd been re-watching the same 18-second clip over and over again. The woman, the weapon, 5 shots, 5 perfect bullseyes. The security camera's timestamp ran from 15:47:22 to 15:47:40, exactly 18 seconds. It was impossible. He hit replay again, watching her settle into position, watching the barrel barely move with each shot, watching her work the bolt with a speed that could only be achieved through thousands of hours of training. A sick feeling grew in his gut as he realized it was probably way more than that. The regular army doesn't produce shooters this good. His roommate, Jensen, walked in and dropped his duffel bag on the floor. "You're still watching that? Man, just drop it." The girl got a lucky break. "Lucky?" Brooks said, his eyes glued to the screen. 5 shots, 800 meters, 18 seconds, and every single one perfectly centered. "That's not luck, Jensen." Jensen just shrugged as he pulled off his boots. "So she's talented. The army's full of talented people, dude." "Not this talented," Brooks muttered. "Not from that range, not at that speed." He finally looked up from the laptop. "I've been a marksman for 8 years. I've held an expert rating for the last 3. My personal best for 5 shots at 800 meters is 32 seconds, and I thought I was a rock star for that. She did it in 18, and her grouping was smaller than my thumbnail. So she's better than you. Big deal. Get over it." But Brooks couldn't. There was something about the whole thing that just felt wrong. It was her posture, the steady cadence of her breathing, the way she just stood there and absorbed the verbal assault from Kane and the others. It was like she'd heard it all before, like she had faced things that made addressing down from an officer feel like a minor inconvenience. He snapped his laptop shut and leaned back in his chair, frustrated. "I'm personally inspecting her equipment tomorrow morning before the qualification. Every single piece. I'm gonna make damn sure it's 100% standard issue." "Dude, Kane already checked it." "I know what Kane did. I'm doing it again. Something is not right. She's too polished, too calm. Her story makes no sense." Jensen shot him a skeptical look. "You know what I think? I think you're just salty that some random woman showed up on your range and made you look like an amateur in front of the command staff. That's all this is about. No, that's not. Brooks stopped himself. Could Jensen be right? Was this just about his bruised ego? Still, the numbers didn't lie. Nobody achieves that level of skill without a serious history. And whatever her history was, she was guarding it like a state secret. Her uniform had been completely sterile, no name, no rank insignia, no unit patch. All he had seen was a standard combat uniform, a rifle, and a degree of skill that was completely out of place for the nobody she was pretending to be. He stood and grabbed his jacket. I'm going to run a check through the personnel files, see what I can find. You don't have her name? I have her face, Brooks snapped, and I have the precise time she was on my range. It's a place to start. He walked to the door, then paused. And if I'm right about this, if she is hiding something, then tomorrow's little qualification test is going to be one for the ages. Jensen just shook his head and went back to his phone. All right, man, whatever you say. Just do me one favor and call me when you find out she's just some private with a chip on her shoulder. I want to be the first one to say I told you so. Brooks didn't even bother to answer. He stepped out into the chilly, silent hallway, where the only sound was the low buzz of the overhead fluorescent lights. He took the stairs down to the first floor 2 at a time, making a beeline for the administration building. In this day and age, everything was digital personnel files. Security clearances, service records, all of it was linked across every single branch of the military. If she was a real soldier, she had to be in the database. And if she wasn't, well, that opened up a whole different can of worms. He swiped his ID, and the electronic lock on the records office door clicked open. It was way after hours, but his rank came with certain perks. He was a powerful admiral, accustomed to everyone falling in line. She was a ghost with no name, a mysterious woman who had somehow appeared on his firing range without a single record to her name. He saw her as an insult, a glitch in his perfect system that he needed to erase. So he decided to make a public example out of her to put everyone back in their place. He had no idea he was about to make the biggest mistake of his entire career. You're going to want to stick around to see how this quiet, unassuming woman dismantles one of the most arrogant men in the entire military without firing a single bullet his way. The Admiral's top aide, Brooks, was given the job of digging up some dirt on her, so he started with the digital access logs for the range. In a room lit only by the blue glow of his computer screen, he scrolled down to lane 7, focusing on the time between 3:45 and 4 o'clock. He found the entry, but her name wasn't there. Instead, there was a simple, maddening note. Walk on, approved by Rangemaster Ellis. This was a massive violation of the rules. Everybody, and he meant everybody, had to show military ID. How in the world did she get past the front desk? He pulled up the security camera footage, rewound it to 3:30, and there she was. She walked right up to the counter, showed the clerk a card, and was waved through in less than 30 seconds. Brooks zoomed in, squinting to get a clear look at the card she was holding, but the camera's resolution was garbage. For all he knew, it could have been a standard military ID, or it could have been a library card. And since the clerk's computer monitor was angled away from the camera, he had hit a complete dead end. Frustrated, Brooks leaned back in his chair, running the day's events through his mind. He remembered how Rangemaster Ellis had turned white as a sheet after he saw her shoot. And then another memory clicked into place. Ellis making a hushed, encrypted call on his radio, stepping away from the others like he was sharing a national secret. Ellis knew something. Brooks made a promise to himself that he was going to get it out of him first thing in the morning. Outside of that authorization, I can't give you any more details. Do you understand, sir? But I need to know. What you times need times to know is that she is authorized. That's all. You will not run her fingerprints. You will not flag her credentials. And you will not, under any circumstances, mention this phone call to another living soul unless you are on a secure channel. Are we crystal clear, Rangemaster? Ellis felt his mouth go completely dry. Yes, sir. Crystal clear. Good. And Ellis, if she shows up for the qualification test tomorrow, you let her shoot. Do not get in her way. That is a direct order. The line went dead before Ellis could even think of a response. He just sat there in the deepening silence of his office, his mind racing to connect the dots. G2, that's military intelligence. They don't get involved in the daily business of a firing range. They never, ever call a place like Fort Davidson unless something huge is happening. Something that was so far above his pay grade, it wasn't even funny. He'd been in the Army long enough to know how to read between the lines. The vague answers, the orders that were phrased like polite requests, and the unspoken warning that one more question would be a career-ending move. This woman wasn't just some talented shooter. She was something else entirely. She was someone being protected. The kind of person who could make colonels from intelligence call up a humble range master and tell him to stand down and forget everything he just saw. Ellis slid open his desk drawer and pulled out the single spent shell casing he had quietly picked up from her lane earlier. He rolled the little piece of brass between his fingers. It looked perfectly normal, but the way she had fired it with that ice-cold, almost robotic precision and impossible speed was anything but normal. He understood what the colonel's words really meant. It was a very clear warning: back off, or you'll regret it. This woman wasn't just a good shot. She was being protected by the highest levels of power. He thought about the tattoo he had barely glimpsed when her sleeve rode up for just a second. It was a complex design of dark, geometric shapes on her forearm. It didn't look like just ink. It felt like a symbol, like a story he really didn't want to know the end of. He realized with a sudden jolt of fear that Admiral Kane had no idea what kind of fight he was picking. The Admiral thought he was challenging a soldier. In reality, he was poking a hornet's nest. Ellis grabbed his phone and scrolled through contacts he hadn't called in years, finally stopping on a name: Master Sergeant Lin, retired. Lin lived about a 40-minute drive from the base in Mesa, but his expertise came from a world much, much farther away, 2 decades spent in places that don't show up on any official maps. If anyone could understand the kind of danger they were in, it was him. The phone rang twice. A gruff voice answered. Ellis, it's been a while. Lin, I need to ask you something. Completely off the books, Ellis said, keeping his voice down. There was a short pause. I'm listening. Let's just say, hypothetically, Ellis started that you saw a woman, maybe in her late 20s, with no rank insignia, hit 5 perfect bullseyes from 800 meters in under 20 seconds with a standard issue rifle. What would you think? The silence on the other end of the line dragged on, feeling heavy and cold. When Lin finally spoke, any trace of friendliness was gone from his voice. I'd tell you to turn around, walk away, and forget you ever saw her, Ellis. Ellis felt his stomach drop. That's what I was afraid of. The Admiral is forcing her into a public qualification test tomorrow, just to humiliate her. A stream of quiet curses hissed through the phone. Then your Admiral is a fool, Lin said flatly. And you need to prepare for things to go sideways. The kind of sideways that gets careers and people completely erased. Ellis, you're not dealing with some hotshot recruit here. You're dealing with a survivor. Someone who has seen the absolute worst this world has to offer and made it out the other side. If that Admiral pushes her too far, she won't just break his pride. She'll break him. The call ended, leaving Ellis with shaking hands. He knew right then that the test tomorrow wasn't just a test of marksmanship. It was going to be a reckoning. Somewhere on that same military base, a woman with no name and eyes like a gathering storm was preparing. She wasn't nervous, she wasn't tense, she was just ready. Because whatever Admiral Kane thought was going to happen tomorrow, he was dead wrong. Completely and utterly wrong. A man named Ellis stood up, clicked off the lamp on his desk, and walked out into the cold desert night with a quiet prayer. Not for the woman, she didn't need it. He said it for Admiral Kane, because in the morning, the Admiral was about to learn a brutal lesson about underestimating people, delivered from 800 meters away in under 20 seconds. In her small, bare room in Building 12, at 10 p.m., the scene was bleak. The concrete walls were painted a depressing, government-issue beige, and the only furniture was a single cot, a metal locker, and a tiny desk bolted to the floor. They thought she was dead, taken out 3 years ago, a ghost completely wiped from all the official records. But inside this sterile room, the ghost was very much alive. Her only possession in the world was a beat-up old duffel bag, but the real story was glowing on her own two hands under the blue light of her laptop screen. She wasn't typing. She was tracing the chapters of her life that were etched right into her skin. A tiny web-like scar on one knuckle, the tough calluses on her fingertips from a lifetime spent on a trigger, and a thin white line on her ring finger, where a medic had dug out shrapnel in a muddy ditch. Every single mark was a memory they could never erase, a piece of a story they thought was over. But they were about to find out they hadn't even reached the final chapter. And believe me, you're gonna want to see how this story ends. With her sleeve finally rolled up, the truth of her past was right there for the world to see. It wasn't just a tattoo. It was a permanent record that covered her entire forearm. Dead center, inside a sniper's crosshairs, were the numbers 8, 4, and 7, inked with military precision. Underneath it, the words Death Angel were framed by the years 2018 to 2021. This wasn't just body art. It was an accusation. She gently traced the raised lines of the ink, feeling the heavy weight of that number. 847 lives. And here's the little secret that nobody knew. Not all of them were bad guys. Some were just kids, caught on the wrong side of a war they never started. But they all had one thing in common. She was ordered to take them out, and she never ever missed. They were about to publicly humiliate a war hero, but what they didn't know was that they had walked right into her trap. Stick with me for the next 60 seconds to find out how a soldier they left for dead comes back to dismantle the entire system. A quiet ping from her laptop broke the silence. The email was from a ghost, a meaningless string of characters. She typed in the decryption key from muscle memory, and the message popped up. It's on. Their main target, a man named Kaine, had taken the bait. The test was set for 8 in the morning. A guy named Brooks was sniffing around, and someone called Ellis was definitely hiding something. The orders were clear: move to phase 2, but only show her hand if they backed her into a corner. A package was confirmed for 11:30 p.m. The message signed off with 2 words that hit her like a punch to the gut. Good luck, Captain. She scrubbed the email from existence. It had been years since anyone had called her that. 3 long years. 3 years since the bombing in Kabul that was supposed to be the end of her. 3 years since she'd spent 8 months bolted to a chair in a cold, wet basement, enduring endless questions from men with dead eyes who did unspeakable things. They were so sure they had broken her. That was their first mistake. You see, you can't truly break someone who has already accepted they're going to die. You can hurt their body, you can make them scream until their throat is raw, but you can't touch their will to live when they've already let go of everything else. She survived by becoming a hollow shell, just waiting for a single mistake. When they finally slipped up, leaving her alone for just 15 minutes, she tore a piece of rebar from the concrete wall, took down 3 of them, and simply walked out the front door. Bleeding and without shoes, she crossed 12 miles of hostile ground in the dead of night, only to be nearly shot by the very border guards she was running towards for safety. The special ops team that airlifted her out skipped the pleasantries. They just tossed a blanket over her shoulders and took to the sky. The debriefings, the doctors, and the psych evaluations all came later. Then came the final verdict from the top. Captain Vera Cross was now a liability. Her cover was blown. To protect the mission, she had to disappear. And just like that, they gave her a new identity and wiped her off the face of the earth. Her old call sign, Ghost, was no longer a nickname. It was her entire existence. For 3 grueling years, she drifted between dead-end jobs, living completely off the grid, struggling to remember who she was before she became the Death Angel. But then, a piece of intel found its way to her, and it changed everything. The same corrupt network that had taken her father's life and left her to rot was still operating, hidden deep within the military's own ranks. They were trading secrets for cash and getting good soldiers killed. And their next mark was an admiral named Victor Kane, not because he was dirty, but because he was about to blow the whistle on their entire rotten operation. The admiral knew far too much. 8 years earlier, he and Vera's father, Brigadier General David Cross, had started an investigation that got dangerously close to exposing the truth. That investigation died the day her father was killed by a car bomb planted right outside their family home. Vera was just 13 years old. She watched it all unfold on the evening news, the twisted metal, the flames, the body bag, and her mother crumbling at the funeral. Then she saw the official report, which called it a mechanical failure, a blatant lie. That was the day she learned a brutal lesson. The system won't always save you. Sometimes you have to hunt down your own justice. So at 18, she joined up, clawed her way through the ranks, and got so deadly at her job that a man named Jaycock recruited her into a shadow war the world wasn't supposed to know existed. With every target she eliminated, she was secretly crossing a name off a different list. 23 individuals connected to her father's assassination, hidden among her 847 confirmed kills. These people believed they were untouchable. They were dead wrong. But she soon realized the network ran deeper than she could have ever imagined. And now, they were targeting Kine. That was her signal. It was time for the ghost to return from the grave. It was time to play the one card they never knew she held, the fact that she was still breathing. The Death Angel wasn't buried in some unmarked patch of dirt in Kabul, and tomorrow morning, when Kine and Brooks try to publicly disgrace her with bogus fraud charges, they are going to get the shock of their lives. That's when they'll finally see the tattoo, and that's when the whole ugly truth will come pouring out. This isn't about fame. She knows that's just a fast track to a coffin. This is about sending a very clear message. Kine needs to know his life is in danger, and Brooks needs to realize he's just a puppet in a much deadlier game. Sometimes, the only way to win is to knock the entire board over. A sharp knock echoed on her door, 3 quick raps, a beat of silence, then 2 more. The signal. The package was here. Vera opened the door just a crack, revealing a man with a completely blank face. He passed her a small case, gave one sharp nod, and disappeared down the hallway. She threw the deadbolt, set the case on her desk, and snapped it open. Inside sat a secure, untraceable satellite phone and a single photograph. It showed Admiral Kane leaving his house just 2 hours ago. But what made her blood run cold was the vehicle lurking in the background, a dark sedan with tinted windows. It was the exact same make and model as the car parked on her street the night her father died. The license plate was new, but it was their signature move. They were getting arrogant. She put the photo down and picked up the phone. It was already on, showing just one contact, Tower 4. But she wasn't making that call just yet. First, Kane needed to see her face. He needed to know exactly who was hunting the men that were hunting him. After that, she would make the call. After that, it was time for phase 3. Vera tugged her sleeve down, covering the ink on her arm. She lay back on the small cot, fingers laced behind her head, and stared at the water-stained ceiling. Sleep was a luxury she couldn't afford tonight, but that was fine. She was trained to function without it, to push past every human limit of pain and exhaustion. Jaycock had made sure of that. Tomorrow at 800 hours, Kine and Brooks would try to destroy her. What they were about to do was fail so spectacularly that it would ignite a firestorm they could never contain. A fire that wouldn't stop until their entire corrupt network was nothing but ashes, and justice was finally done. Real justice is never clean, and the kind that's been denied for too long is always messy. She had ended 847 lives. 23 of them were for her father. The rest were for her country, for her brothers in arms, for the mission. But tomorrow wasn't about adding another name to her list. Tomorrow was about making sure target number 848 never had to exist. It was about keeping Admiral Kine alive long enough to testify. It was about making sure the people who ripped her father from this world could never, ever destroy another family again. Closing her eyes, she began her breathing ritual. In for 4 seconds, hold for 4, out for 4. It was the rhythm that centered her in a firefight, the one that kept her sane through interrogation, and the one that carried her through 3 long years in the shadows. It was the rhythm that would carry her through tomorrow. Because she was more than just a weapon or a soldier. She was a promise, sealed with blood and kept in the silence. The next morning, Admiral Kine stood there with a smug look on his face, ready to watch her fail. Vera Cross stepped up to the firing line, her face a perfect mask of calm. He had no idea this was never about passing a simple test. For 16 years, ever since men just like him had framed her father, she had been on a single-minded mission. Every step was calculated, every move designed to tear down their rotten system from the inside. She raised the rifle, and in a blur of impossible speed and flawless precision, she didn't just pass the test, she shattered every record. As the Admiral stood there, completely stunned, a helicopter descended nearby. A 2-star general emerged, strode directly to Vera, and snapped a sharp salute. "Ma'am," he said, his voice carrying across the stunned silence. "Your transport is ready." Kaine's face turned as white as a sheet. He wasn't just looking at some disgraced soldier. He was looking at his executioner. And the lesson that day was brutally clear. Real power doesn't need to advertise its rank. She just wouldn't let it stand. There was a reason they called her the Death Angel. She never missed her shot. Not from 800 meters, not from half a mile away. Never. The ceiling fan overhead cut lazy circles through the quiet room. Down the hall, she could hear the ordinary symphony of life footsteps on the floor. A faint laugh, a muffled conversation. It was the soundtrack to a world she could barely remember. A life she lived a lifetime ago, before she became this. Before the tattoos, before the mental list of names, before her whole world was painted in shades of gray and black. Maybe, just maybe, when the dust settled, she could have that life back. Maybe she could just be Vera Cross, a soldier who did her duty, instead of the Death Angel, a ghost with a rifle. Maybe her story didn't have to end in a dark room, tied to a chair, while faceless men asked questions she would rather die than answer. Maybe, but first, she had to survive tomorrow. The official test, the big reveal, that single, perfect moment when Admiral Victor Kane would spot the tattoo on her arm and all the puzzle pieces would slam into place for him. He wouldn't just be looking at some random female sharpshooter. He'd be looking at the woman who dragged his sorry hide out of a losing firefight in a forgotten, dusty corner of Afghanistan 5 years ago. The woman who, according to every official document, had been dead for the last 3 years. The woman who was about to inform him that he was the next name on their hit list, unless she could get to them first. And she would. She would tear them down, no matter what it took, no matter who stood in her way. The mission was all that mattered. It was all she had left. Vera opened her eyes, her gaze locking onto a photo on her desk. Kaine, his car, the enemy moving in. She seared the image into her brain, then grabbed the photograph, tore it into 100 tiny pieces, and flushed them away. Every trace was gone. She had wiped her trail clean. Everything was ready. Tomorrow, at 800 hours, Fort Davidson qualification range, lane 3. The course would be different, the conditions tougher, but the outcome would be exactly the same. The only thing that ever really changes is the distance. The fundamentals never do. Breathe, settle, squeeze. You do it over and over until the job is done, until the mission is complete, until you finally get justice. She stretched out on the cheap mattress. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, sleep actually came. It wasn't peaceful, not by a long shot, but it was real. And in that sleep, she dreamed, not of the dark rooms or the interrogations, but of her dad. He was standing in their old kitchen, flipping pancakes and smiling at her. He was alive. Just like he was before the bombing, before the conspiracy, before her entire world was ripped apart. In the dream, he looked right at her and said, "I am so proud of you, Vera. Now go finish this." And she would. It was all set to begin tomorrow, at precisely 800 hours. It would kick off with 5 perfect shots and one very, very surprised Admiral. The ceiling fan spun overhead, the night deepened, and the Death Angel finally slept, dreaming of the justice she was about to deliver. The early morning air still held the cold bite of the desert night. The firing range was on the far edge of Fort Davidson, a sterile, official place built for tests where mistakes weren't an option. It was all concrete shooting lanes, standardized targets, and enough cameras to catch a gnat blinking. Nothing was being left to chance. Admiral Kane arrived early, with 4 officers trailing him, Brooks included. They all took up positions in an observation tower that gave them a perfect bird's-eye view of Lane 3. Have you ever been set up to fail so spectacularly that people actually form a crowd just to watch the train wreck? That was the exact scene at 7:58 in the morning. Lieutenant Brooks was parading around with a clipboard full of regulations he'd likely crammed for last night, looking for any loophole to disqualify her. The rangemaster, Ellis, looked exhausted, as if he knew deep in his gut that no rulebook was going to contain what was about to happen. An order had come down from Colonel Vance himself. Let this play out. But every instinct Ellis had was screaming that today was going to be an absolute disaster. News about the mystery woman who had humiliated a top admiral had spread through the base like wildfire. And now, the entire base, it seemed, was here for the sequel to see her get knocked down a peg. Everyone desperately wanted to believe that yesterday was a fluke, that the universe hadn't been turned upside down. A universe where skill was supposed to align with the rank sewn onto your sleeve. Brooks checked his watch. 2 minutes left. Admiral Kaine stood in silence, ignoring Brooks's question about whether she'd even have the nerve to show. Something about her performance was eating at him, that flawless breathing, the absolute ice in her veins under pressure. He had only ever seen that kind of focus in the most elite operators. The kind of soldiers whose missions are so secret they are officially denied for the next 50 years. Then, at exactly 800 hours, she appeared. She wore the same plain uniform with no insignia and carried a single rifle case. The crowd literally parted for her as she walked, her eyes fixed on Lane 3, acting like the dozens of people staring at her didn't even exist. Brooks deliberately moved to block her path. "I'll need to inspect your weapon and gear before you can start." She simply stopped and looked straight through him, silent. "Regulations clearly state," he announced loudly, puffing out his chest for the spectators, "that any non-issued firearms require a full pre-qualification inspection. Open the case." Without saying a word, she placed the case on the ground and flipped the latches open. Brooks dropped to his knees and started tearing through it. He checked the stock, the receiver, the scope, and the barrel. He checked every single serial number, measured the trigger pull with a gauge, and inspected the scope's mounting brackets. With every single component that turned out to be perfectly regulation, you could see the frustration building in his face. He couldn't find a single thing to bust her on. At last, he slammed the case shut. "Fine, you're clear to proceed," he muttered, climbing to his feet. "But for your information, the target is at 1,000 meters today, not 800. It's a completely different animal. You get 3 tries, 5 shots each. You need a minimum of 45 out of 50 points to pass. And just so we're all clear," he added with a nasty little smirk, "we have cameras on you from every possible angle this time." She just picked up her case, walked to Lane 3, and started methodically setting up her gear. The crowd pressed in a little closer, and someone joked that you'd need a telescope just to see her miss. The whole event felt more like a public spectacle than a military test. The range officer's voice crackled over the PA system. "Shooter, you have 10 minutes for preparation. 3 attempts, 5 shots per attempt. A minimum score of 45 is required. The range is now hot. You may fire when you are ready." She settled in behind the rifle, each movement economical and precise. She adjusted the scope, took a single, long, slow breath, and fell into that perfect, deadly rhythm. In for 4 counts, hold for 4, out for 4. Brooks leaned toward Kaine. "Watch this," he whispered. "This first shot will be a mile off." It's a classic rookie error at this distance. A single rifle shot cracked through the quiet morning air. 1,000 meters downrange, a digital screen lit up, displaying a perfect bullseye in the 10-point circle. Lieutenant Brooks just rolled his eyes. "Beginner's luck," he mumbled under his breath. The wind did all the work. A second shot rang out, just as controlled, just as steady. Another perfect 10. The crowd, which had been buzzing with jeers and whispers, went completely quiet. You could see people physically leaning forward, their curiosity now fully captured. The 3rd, 4th, and 5th shots followed, punching through the exact same spot and creating one single, jagged hole in the dead center of the target. A perfect 50 out of 50 on her very first try. Brooks's face turned ghost white as he stared at the monitor, Recheck the range, he snapped at the technician. That can't be right. A calm voice crackled back over the radio. All systems are green, sir. The range is 1,000 meters, plus or minus a few inches. We ran a full diagnostic this morning, by the book. Admiral Kaine moved closer to the screen. His eyes narrowed with a look of pure astonishment. He couldn't make sense of it. From 1,000 meters, with the wind kicking up dust, she'd put 5 shots into a group so tight you could hide it with a quarter. This wasn't just skill, it was something supernatural. He saw it again in his mind. Her calm, steady breathing, the perfect form, the impossible result. Just as the announcer started the second round, Lieutenant Brooks held up a hand. Hold on, we're switching things up. Move her to lane 5. The safety officer's voice crackled on the radio, full of disbelief. Sir, you can't do that. It's a massive breach of protocol. I'm the senior officer here, and I'm calling it a safety concern. Brooks lied without skipping a beat. Lane 3 has too much tree cover. Lane 5 is wide open. If she's as good as she seems, it won't matter. From the stands, Admiral Kaine gave a slow, thoughtful nod. Proceed. The woman, Vera, said nothing. She simply gathered her rifle and walked calmly to her new position. Everyone watching knew this was a setup, a cheap trick to shatter her concentration. But her face was a mask of calm. She just methodically laid out her gear, went through her pre-shot routine, and settled back into that focused, rhythmic breathing. The wind in lane 5 was a beast. The range flags were nearly horizontal, snapping in the 10-mile-per-hour gusts. Brooks watched with a smug little smile, certain he was about to expose her as a complete fraud. 5 more shots rang out, each one spaced perfectly. And on the monitor, 5 more holes bloomed in the dead center of the target. Another perfect 50 points, for a total of 100 out of 100. The range fell completely silent. The quiet snickering from moments before died, replaced by dropped jaws and wide eyes. People started pulling out their phones, scrambling to record what felt like a miracle. Brooks was so stunned, his clipboard slipped from his sweaty hand and clattered to the ground. For the third round, I want to, that will be all, Admiral Kaine interrupted. His voice was quiet, but it carried the undeniable force of command. There's no need for a third round. She has qualified. In fact, she's overqualified. Kaine strode right up to her station. Who was your instructor? He demanded. Vera didn't even bother looking up from cleaning her rifle. I've had several instructors, sir. That's not a real answer, Kaine snapped. It's the only answer I'm authorized to give you, sir, she replied, her voice perfectly level. The Admiral's jaw tightened. I want to see your identification and your complete service record. Right now, she finally raised her head, and her cool, gray eyes met his without a hint of fear. Sir, with all due respect, that is not a good idea, especially not here, with everyone watching. I wasn't asking, Kaine growled. Brooks came swaggering over, trying to look important again. Yeah, let's see some ID in your orders. How do we know you even have clearance to be on this base? This could be some kind of publicity stunt. Then, he made a huge mistake. He reached out and grabbed her arm, trying to haul her to her feet, his fingers pressing hard into her left forearm. The second he pulled, her uniform sleeve slid up, revealing a tattoo for the world to see. It was a sniper's scope, with the number 847 inked right in the crosshairs. Underneath, the words Death Angel were written above the dates, 2018 to 2021, just over the unmistakable eagle and dagger insignia of the Joint Special Operations Command. Brooks froze solid, his hand still clamped on her arm, his mouth hanging open. A wave of hushed, shocked whispers spread through the crowd as people began to point. In the control tower, the safety officer went pale and grabbed the console to steady himself. He recognized that tattoo. He mashed the button on his radio. All personnel, stand down. I repeat, all range units, stand down immediately. Kaine just stared at the ink on her arm, his expression shifting from confusion to shock, to utter disbelief, and finally to raw, unfiltered horror. His lips moved, trying to form a name he couldn't say out loud, then he finally whispered it. 847. With a smooth, easy motion, she pulled her arm out of Brooks's stunned grip. Brooks yanked his hand back like he just touched a hot stove. She calmly pulled her sleeve back into place, but it was too late. Every single person there had just seen a ghost. Kane's voice was barely audible. Your ghost. That name rippled across the range like an electric current, stopping all 50 people in their tracks. Ghost, call sign 847, was a legend in the armed forces, a special operator who was officially listed as killed in action 3 years ago. But she was standing right there. An old-timer in a veteran's hat pushed his way through the frozen crowd. It was retired Master Sergeant Lin, who'd driven for hours on an anonymous tip. He stopped a few feet away, his eyes wide with awe. "Death Angel," he said, his voice trembling. "Operation Silent Dawn. Afghanistan, 2020. You saved the Admiral's entire command during that ambush. The legend says you neutralized 30 enemy combatants alone in under 6 minutes. They said your longest confirmed shot was over 1,200 meters. Lin went on, his voice thick with emotion. The official record states you were killed during the Kabul evacuation. And if you want to find out how a soldier who's been gone for 3 years can suddenly reappear and save the day, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because the rest of this story is unbelievable." Vera finally stood up, looking Admiral Kane directly in the eye. "My name is Captain Vera Cross, Joint Special Operations Command. I served in sniper operations from 2018 to 2021. My file reflects 847 confirmed engagements. And you, Admiral Kane, have been targeted for assassination." Kane flinched as if she'd struck him. "What are you talking about? The same organization that took my father, Brigadier General David Cross, out of the picture in 2016 is now coming for you. They're aware you're scheduled to testify before Congress. They know what kind of evidence you possess, and they have a plan to make sure you are silenced for good." Brooks finally found his voice, though it was shaking badly. That's completely insane." Vera's gaze snapped to him, and it was like looking into a frozen lake. "Lieutenant Brooks, how long has your family been receiving threats? When did they start sending you those pictures in the mail? The ones of your wife, Sarah, getting in her car after work? Or the photos of your children, Emma and Lucas, playing at the school park?" All the color vanished from Brooks's face, leaving behind a mask of pure terror. How could you know their names?" "Because," Vera said, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous tone, "the people threatening your family are the same people who left me to die in a ditch in Kabul. They've been blackmailing you, using your family as leverage to make you sabotage anyone who gets close to the Admiral. And right now, they are holding your wife and kids hostage." The clipboard Brooks had just retrieved slipped from his fingers a second time, cracking on the pavement. He began to tremble violently. "You have no idea what you're talking about." "Warehouse at the southern edge of the base," she said, her expression unchanging. "2 armed men are posted outside. 3 more are inside with your family. For the past 6 weeks, they've been passing you coded instructions, right?" She continued, laying his whole secret nightmare out for everyone to hear. It started with small things, leaking schedules, messing with guard rosters. But then they ordered you to shut down anyone who showed too much interest in the Admiral's security detail. When I showed up, your assignment was to make sure I failed this qualification test in the most public and humiliating way you could manage. Brooks staggered back a step, his face completely breaking. "I didn't have a choice," he choked out as tears streamed down his face. "They sent me pictures. They showed me what they would do to them if I didn't cooperate. I had to do it." "I know," Vera said, her voice softening just a fraction. "And that's the reason I'm here. We're going to get them back." Kane was still reeling, trying to connect the dots. A legendary soldier back from the dead, a conspiracy he thought was long gone, and an immediate threat on his life. If all this is true, why the dramatic display? Why didn't you just come to me directly? "Because," she said, her eyes locking onto his, "I had to find out which person on your staff was the traitor. I needed to set the bait, to let them think their plan was working perfectly," she explained, her focus absolute. "And I needed you to witness firsthand what I am capable of, before I told you that your life was on the line. 5 years ago, in that canyon, you got on the comms and you asked who I was. I told you it didn't matter. All that mattered was keeping you alive. Nothing's changed, Admiral. Your job is to stay alive long enough to give your testimony. I will handle the rest. Master Sergeant Lin snapped to a rigid posture of attention. Captain Cross, what are your orders? We are going to that warehouse and we are getting Lieutenant Brooks's family back, she announced, her voice filled with the unshakable confidence of command. I have 43 minutes until they're scheduled to be moved. If that happens, we will lose them for good. She then turned her intense gaze on the shattered lieutenant. I can bring them home, but I need your help. You are going to tell me every single thing you remember, starting right now. Have you ever been pushed into a corner so tight you had to betray everything you believed in just to protect the people you love? That's the nightmare Lieutenant Brooks was living. For 6 agonizing weeks, a shadowy group had held his family hostage, forcing him to leak classified intel. Trapped and broken, he finally confessed everything to Investigator Vera. They'd snatched him off the street, hooded him, and showed him his wife and kids tied up in a grimy warehouse just to prove the threat was real. Now, with the truth finally out, Vera stood before Admiral Kane. Sir, I've been hunting this syndicate for 3 months. I know their playbook, their safe houses. I need the green light for a rescue operation on American soil. This time, the Admiral's usual skepticism was gone. It's yours. What else? Vera's gaze was like granite. I need Lieutenant Brooks with me. And you, sir, will remain in this room with every single person here as a witness until my team is back. They won't dare touch you with this many eyes watching. It was a story of impossible choices. And if you want to see how a true hero is forged in fire, make sure you subscribe, because this gets intense. She took a deep breath, letting it out slowly. And get me Rangemaster Ellis. I need him to pull every frame of security footage from the past 90 days. I want a log of every single vehicle that entered the industrial park between 2 and 4 in the morning. The snake running this operation isn't halfway across the world. He's here, on this base. Someone with a high-level clearance. Someone we're all supposed to trust. Without a word, Ellis was already heading for the door. You got it. The Admiral looked at Vera, but for the first time, he saw past the uniform. He saw the soldier who had dragged him from a burning vehicle, the woman who had survived 8 months in an enemy prison camp, and the relentless hunter who had spent 16 years chasing the ghosts who murdered her father. Why didn't you tell me any of this? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Her eyes locked onto his. Because yesterday, I was just another officer. Today, you needed to see the ghost. The woman who pulled you from that fire. The one they say can't miss. And now, I need you to trust that woman one more time. Her voice lowered, charged with the energy of a storm about to break. 8 years ago, my father was your partner. You two were digging into fraud connected to military supply contracts. He found a trail of corruption that went all the way to the top. The night before he was set to brief the Secretary of Defense, his car was blown to pieces. I was 13 years old. I was watching cartoons when a news alert flashed on the screen, and I watched them scrape what was left of my dad into a body bag. Her voice was chillingly flat, carrying the weight of a wound that had never been allowed to heal. The official report called it a mechanical failure. Case closed. But I knew. Even at 13, I knew they had murdered him. So I waited. The second I turned 18, I enlisted. I scratched and clawed for every promotion, earned a spot on a Black Ops team, and with every mission, with every single target I neutralized, I cross-referenced them with a list. My list. The names of everyone connected to my father's assassination. Out of 847 confirmed targets in my career, 23 of them were on that list. 23 powerful men who thought they got away with killing a brigadier general. The blood drained from Admiral Kane's face. David Cross, he was my best friend, my brother. After he died, his voice cracked with shame. I knew it wasn't an accident, but I couldn't prove a thing, and I was scared. I had a wife, kids, so I kept my mouth shut. I told myself there was nothing I could do. I know, Vera said, her tone softening just a fraction. And that's why I'm here. This is bigger than revenge. This is about finishing the job he started, because the same people who took him out are now coming for you. But this time, I'm the one with the skills, the evidence, and the unwavering will to burn their entire world to the ground. For that to happen, I need you to stay alive, to testify. I need Lieutenant Brooks to find his spine and choose the right side. And I need exactly 42 minutes to pull off a rescue that will bring 3 innocent people home and shatter this conspiracy once and for all. Brooks scrubbed the tears from his cheeks. If you're wrong about any of this, my family dies, the Admiral dies, and those bastards win. I'm not wrong, Lieutenant, Vera said, her certainty absolute. This is your one chance to fix this, to save your family and help me avenge my father. She slung a rifle case over her shoulder. So, are you with me? Brooks looked at Kane, who gave him a sharp, firm nod. Go, bring them home. And Brooks, they put you in an impossible situation. This is how you make it right. Don't you dare waste it. A newfound strength surged through Brooks, and he stood up straighter. Yes, sir. The crowd of officers in the room parted like the sea as Vera and Brooks marched toward the exit. Lynn, Vera's loyal second in command, fell in right behind them without a word. Seeing this, 3 other combat veterans who understood the gravity of the moment silently joined the procession. By the time they reached the parking lot, a 6-person rescue team had formed. They crammed into 2 black SUVs, Vera jumping into the driver's seat of the lead truck with Brooks riding shotgun. As they peeled out and raced toward the South Side Industrial Park, the sun finally broke over the horizon, casting the desert in a hopeful, golden glow. 41 minutes until the exchange. The time was 8:52 in the morning. The warehouse was a lone, rusted metal box surrounded by a sagging, chain-link fence. 2 guards stood out front, lazily sharing a cigarette, their rifles hanging forgotten at their sides. They clearly weren't expecting visitors. The syndicate had operated without a hitch for years, and it had made them sloppy. Vera pulled the SUVs over 3 blocks away and gave a quick, quiet briefing. Brooks, you're on the vehicles. Keep the engines running. The second you see us emerge with your family, you put the pedal to the floor. Understood? I should be in there with you, he protested. You're too close to this, Vera shot back, her voice firm but not unkind. Your emotions are a liability. Let us do our job. She turned to Lynn and the other vets. Non-lethal takedowns are preferred, but the hostages are the mission. They get out clean, whatever it takes. Lynn just tapped the stock of her rifle. Protect the family. The rest is just noise. Vera glanced at her watch. 38 minutes. Let's move. We go in 3 teams. They melted away into the shadows of the surrounding buildings, approaching from different directions. Vera from the east, Lynn from the west. The 2 sentries never even heard them coming. 2 soft times, thwips times from suppressed rifles, and both men dropped, knocked out cold by tranquilizer darts. The team converged on a side entrance. Vera skipped the dramatic door breach. Instead, her expert hands picked the lock in seconds, and she eased the heavy door open without a sound. Sometimes, the quietest way in is the deadliest. Inside, 3 more goons were sitting around a rickety card table, lost in their game. Across the vast room, Sarah Brooks was duct-taped to a chair. Her 2 young children were tied up at her feet, wide-eyed with terror but physically unharmed. The card players never had a chance to look up from their hands. Vera's team moved through the warehouse like a whisper, a silent, coordinated storm of takedowns. In less than 15 seconds, all 3 men were on the floor, disarmed and secured with zip ties. Sarah was already sobbing with relief as Lynn cut her free, pulling her kids into a fierce hug. But Vera knew the head of the snake was still here. Rifle raised, she moved to a small office in the back and kicked the door clean off its hinges. A woman was sitting behind the desk. She looked to be in her early 50s, her graying hair pulled into a tight, severe bun. Pinned to the collar of her immaculate uniform was the silver eagle of a full colonel. It was Diane Frost, the deputy base commander, a woman respected by everyone, a mentor to young officers, and the secret viper at the heart of the entire corrupt enterprise. Frost looked up, a faint, condescending smile on her face. Captain Cross, I had a feeling you'd figure it out eventually. On your feet, Vera ordered, her voice like ice. Show me your hands. Frost rose slowly, that smug smile never leaving her face. You do realize this changes nothing, don't you? I'm just one small part of a much larger, more powerful machine. Maybe, Vera said, stepping closer, her voice a low, dangerous growl. But you're the part that murdered my father. You're the part that betrayed your country. And today, you're the part that gets broken. You are going to sing Colonel. You're going to give me every name, every hidden account, and every dirty little secret you have. Because if you don't, Vera's voice went dangerously quiet, you're going to disappear inside a federal black hole. No plea deals, no press conferences. No one will ever hear your side of it. You'll just be another footnote about a traitor nobody cares about. Frost let out a dry, empty laugh. You really think I'm scared of a cell? No, Vera said, closing the distance between them. But you're terrified of being irrelevant, of being forgotten, of rotting away while the empire you built just keeps running without you. If you talk, you go down in history as the woman who torched the whole system. Your name gets its own chapter. If you stay silent, you're just gone. For the first time, something flickered in Frost's eyes. Maybe it was raw fear, maybe just cold strategy. On your knees, Vera ordered softly. Put your hands behind your head. After a tense, drawn-out moment, the colonel slowly lowered herself to the floor. Lynn stepped in, and the sharp snap of the handcuffs echoed through the vast warehouse. Just outside, Brooks watched his family step out of the darkness. His little girl, Sarah, ran full speed into his embrace as his other kids grabbed onto his legs, a tangle of small hands and tear-streaked faces. He dropped to his knees, gathering them all into a giant, sobbing hug. I'm so sorry. I should have. You got us back, Sarah whispered, her words muffled by his shirt. That's all that matters. Vera was the last one out, escorting Frost at gunpoint. By that time, Admiral Kane was on site with a full detail of MPs, while a helicopter's blades beat the air above them. The base was on total lockdown. Kane walked straight up to Frost, his expression carved from stone. Why? Frost remained silent. Why did you kill David Cross? Why was I on your list? Why would you betray the oath you swore to this nation? Frost finally met his gaze, her voice completely empty of any feeling. Because the game is rigged, because the powerful get rich while good soldiers die for nothing but their lies. Using the information from Brooks, Vera, and a small team of operators hit the warehouse like a force of nature. The whole thing was done in less than 5 minutes. The person behind it all, a corrupt contractor named Frost, just smirked while they cuffed her. Someone's got to turn a profit from all this madness, she sneered. Figured it might as well be us. Us? Kane's tone was pure ice. You said us. Who else is involved? Frost simply gave him a smug look and stayed quiet. Vera stepped up. Oh, she's going to talk. They all do. Once they figure out their only other option is to watch their entire world burn down from the inside of a jail cell. As the MPs hauled Frost and 5 of her associates away, medics were already seeing to Sarah and the children, who were rattled but unharmed. Brooks approached Vera directly, and in front of the Admiral and the entire team, he went down on one knee. Captain Cross, I treated you like garbage. I tried to shame you in front of everyone. I put your life on the line. And this whole time, you were saving my family, stopping a hit, and finishing the job your own father died for. His voice broke, thick with regret and awe. I know I have no right to ask this, but I'm asking for your forgiveness, he managed to say, unable to look up from the floor. You gave me everything back today. My wife, my kids. You gave me a shot at fixing the biggest mistake of my life. I promise you, I will spend the rest of my days making sure people know what you did. Vera looked down at the kneeling man, her face a mask. Get up, Lieutenant. He stayed put. I can't. I said, stand up, she said again, her tone firm but without anger. You were backed into a corner. You made the wrong choices for the right reasons. But when it really mattered, you decided to trust me. That's what counts. She let that sink in. Your family is okay. That's the only thing that's important right now. Go be with them. Brooks shakily got to his feet. Thank you, he choked out, for all of it. As he rushed over to his family, Admiral Kane came and stood next to Vera, a new and profound respect in his gaze. What would you do if they told you that your father, a decorated war hero, died in some kind of bizarre training accident? You know in your gut it's a lie, but every door you knock on gets slammed in your face by the very institution he gave his life for. They try to shut you up, they make threats, and they do everything they can to destroy your career. This isn't a movie. This was the reality for Captain Vera Cross. They stole her job, her good name, and her father, but they made one huge miscalculation. They didn't finish the job. You will not believe how this one woman, with absolutely nothing to lose except her training and a powerful need for the truth, dismantled a conspiracy that went all the way to the top. Stick with me to find out how she did it. And hey, if you're a fan of underdog stories, do yourself a favor and smash that subscribe button. For years, Vera just fell off the grid. She became a ghost, moving from one dingy motel to the next, paying for everything in cash, and never staying long enough for anyone to remember her face. Every last dollar was stretched to its limit, every meal was whatever was cheapest, and every single night was a battle against the memories of her dad, Brigadier General David Cross. He was the one who taught her how to sight a rifle, how to command, how to respect the uniform, and now the same men he called his brothers were the ones responsible for his death. Her first break in the case was a name, whispered by an informant just before he died, Colonel Frost. But as soon as Vera started looking into Frost's background, she hit a solid wall of nothing. The file was squeaky clean, too clean. It was a digital ghost town, a cleverly set trap that nearly got Vera killed when she walked into it. She made it out by the skin of her teeth, realizing with a cold dread that Frost Network had its tentacles everywhere. In a last-ditch move, she contacted the one person she believed was still on her side, her father's best friend, Captain Kane. But when she finally got him on a secure line, his voice was flat and dead. He told her to back off, that she was chasing ghosts and disrespecting her father's memory. The rejection hit her like a physical blow. Was he part of it too? That unexpected betrayal stung worse than any wound. With no one left to turn to, Vera felt her last shred of hope start to die. But then she remembered another name from the past. Her dad's former Master Sergeant Lynn, a guy who'd been retired for 3 years, but still knew where all the bodies were buried. Lynn, a weathered old soldier who wanted no part of her war, eventually gave in and offered to help. He placed a single phone call, and that call blew the entire case wide open. The big secret wasn't that Kane was corrupt, but that he was compromised. Colonel Frost had him in a chokehold, using the safety of his family as leverage to ensure his cooperation. This conspiracy was never just about skimming millions from defense contracts. It was about selling highly classified intelligence to foreign powers. Her father had stumbled onto the truth, and they killed him for it. Suddenly, all the pieces snapped together. Kane wasn't a bad guy. He was a hostage. In that moment, Vera knew her mission had changed. It was no longer just about getting revenge for her dad. It was about saving a good man's family and his honor. 3 months later, long after the news cycle had moved on and the official inquiries were over, the justice Vera fought for finally came crashing down. Frost received a sentence of 35 years in a federal penitentiary. 4 other high-ranking colonels were given sentences between 20 and 30 years. And over a dozen other officers were court-martialed and kicked out of the service in disgrace. The whole corrupt enterprise was completely dismantled. Brooks, the officer Kane had been blackmailed into protecting, was fully exonerated of the trumped-up charges and given his command back, with his family finally safe. As for Captain Kane, his 6 hours of explosive testimony exposed the entire procurement racket, leading to a complete overhaul of military oversight. He took his retirement with full honors, his reputation restored, and his conscience clear. In the calm after the storm, Kane found Vera on the tarmac, watching the sun come up. He approached her, came to a rigid position of attention, and delivered a salute that was textbook perfect. On behalf of the United States Navy, he began, his voice thick with feeling. And on behalf of your father, who would be bursting with pride right now, thank you. Vera crisply returned the salute. Just doing what I was trained to do, sir. No, Kane corrected him. You did so much more. You were being hunted by my friend's murderers, and you turned the tables and hunted them instead. You gave up everything to complete a mission that David and I had started 8 years ago. And for my part in this, I'm deeply sorry I was such a coward. It took a ghost to come back and teach me what honor really means. You're giving testimony now, Vera said gently. That's not cowardice. He simply shook his head. Only because you lit the way. A faint, exhausted smile finally touched Vera's lips. Her father's death hadn't been meaningless. The institution he loved, the one that had been so corrupted, was finally beginning to right itself. She submitted her official retirement papers, and when the Navy offered her the Medal of Honor, she politely declined. Give it to someone still in the service, was her only comment. She found a small, quiet house in the middle of the New Mexico desert, looking forward to some peace. But about 1 week later, a simple manila envelope with no return address appeared in her mailbox. Inside was a single satellite photo of a foreign military installation along with a handwritten message. Tower 4 says hello. There's still one name left, and she did. Faced with irrefutable proof and Vera's unyielding pressure, Colonel Frost's empire of corruption crumbled. She gave up every name, leading to a chain of arrests that reached the highest levels of power. Lieutenant Brooks was reunited with his family, his name cleared, and his honor restored. Admiral Kane testified, finally doing right by his fallen friend. And Vera, she finally got justice. The path had been long and dark, but she'd seen it through to the end. It just goes to show you that it's never too late to find your courage and stand for what's right, even when you're afraid. True heroes aren't the ones who are never scared. They're the ones who act anyway. Thanks for listening to this incredible story. If you enjoyed it, please remember to subscribe to MVB Story for more tales of courage and justice.